You ever find yourself in a season where everything around you seems loud, but somehow your soul feels quiet? Like something deep within you is stirring, but you can't quite name it. You go about your day, doing all the things, checking the boxes, smiling when you're supposed to, laughing when the moment demands. But inside, something is whispering. And if you really slow down, just for a moment, you hear it. There is more. That whisper, that pull. That's not your imagination. That's not restlessness. That's not even ambition. That's God. And He is calling you higher. I'm not talking about a promotion. I'm not talking about elevation in the eyes of people. I'm talking about a divine shift, a sacred invitation, a summons into deeper identity, deeper purpose, deeper intimacy with the one who made you. You see, too often, we think God only calls us when we're ready, when our lives are polished, when we've healed from our past, when we've dotted every I and crossed every T. But let me tell you, God doesn't call the ready, He calls the willing. And when He calls you higher, He already knows what you're carrying. He knows the heartbreak. He knows the insecurity. He knows the questions you've been too afraid to say out loud. And still, He calls. I remember a young woman who thought she had it all figured out. She had a plan, a timeline, and a checklist for her life. But life has a way of disrupting even our best plans. She found herself in a season where everything familiar was stripped away. The relationships, the job, the titles. She looked in the mirror one day and barely recognized who she was anymore. And that was the beginning of her becoming. Because sometimes God has to break what's been built on the wrong foundation so He can rebuild it with truth. Sometimes the loss you thought would destroy you was actually a rescue in disguise. Sometimes what looks like rejection is really redirection. That young woman, I'm telling you her story because she realized that rock bottom isn't the end. It's just where God starts writing the part of the story where He becomes your anchor. God is calling you higher, not because you have it all together, but because He's ready to show you who you truly are, who you were always meant to be before life tried to convince you otherwise. And hear me, this is not about striving. This is not about doing more to be loved more. This is about surrender. It's about yielding your life back to the one who gave it breath. There's something so holy about surrender. Not the kind that comes from giving up in despair, but the kind that says, God, I don't know what's next, but I trust you with it. I trust that if you're calling me, you've already made a way. Sometimes we don't step into what God has for us because we've convinced ourselves we're unworthy. But let me tell you something. God knew your flaws when He called you. He knew your weaknesses when He anointed you. He knew your doubts when He planted that dream in your spirit. And still, He said, yes, that one. I choose her. I choose him. God doesn't speak to the version of you that's pretending. He speaks to the real you, the messy, honest, growing, learning you. And when He calls you higher, it's not always comfortable. It might mean letting go of things that once made you feel safe. It might mean walking alone for a while. It might mean stepping out into the unknown without a full blueprint. But isn't that where faith lives? Think about Abraham. God told him to go, but didn't give him a full itinerary. Just go to a land I will show you. And Abraham went, not because he knew every detail, but because he trusted the voice. When God calls you higher, He's asking for your yes, not your resume. And I know sometimes the weight of that call feels too heavy. You wonder, why me? Why now? What if I fail? But can I tell you something? You were born for this. The call that's on your life was written into your spirit before you took your first breath. And yes, it's big. Yes, it's stretching you. But grace will carry you where strength cannot. There's someone listening right now. You've been playing small, shrinking your light, settling for what's easy, what's known, what's safe. But deep down, you know God's been nudging you, waking you up at night, stirring you in quiet moments, reminding you of dreams you buried, calling you to forgive when it would be easier to stay bitter, calling you to love when your heart feels guarded, calling you to rise up when fear tells you to sit down. And I get it. Stepping higher means leaving the familiar. It means confronting the lies that told you you're not enough. But what if I told you that the enemy has been fighting you, not because you're weak, but because you're dangerous to the darkness? What if I told you your obedience could unlock healing in someone else's life? That your courage could break generational cycles? This isn't just about you. Your yes is connected to someone else's freedom. Your breakthrough is a blueprint for someone still in the battle. Your voice, your story, your testimony, it matters. God is calling you higher because He's placed something in you that the world needs. Not someday, now. He's calling you to be a voice in dry places, to be light in the shadows, to be bold when silence feels safer. So don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until you have all the answers. Just answer the call. Say yes in the hallway, before the door even opens. Say yes in the unknown. Say yes when your hands are shaking and your heart is racing. Because the moment you do, heaven moves on your behalf. And when you step out, when you say yes to the higher call, you'll realize you were never alone. God was never asking you to do it in your own strength. He was just waiting for your agreement. So here's my question. Will you answer? Will you trust Him enough to go where He's calling you, even if it scares you? Will you believe that what's ahead is greater than what's behind? He's calling you. And it's not random. It's not accidental. It's intentional. You've been marked, set apart, chosen. This is your moment. This is your invitation. God is calling you higher. Will you go? God is calling you higher. I know that might sound like just another phrase you've heard, but I want you to stop and truly hear those words. God is calling you higher. This is not a whisper. It is a divine summons, a call to go beyond where you are and step into a purpose far bigger than you can see right now. But what does that really mean for you? What does it look like when God calls you higher? And why should you respond?
To truly understand, we need to first examine the very nature of God's calling. It is not an invitation to stay in a place of comfort. It is not a request to remain in the familiar, to settle for the mediocrity of what you've always known. No, when God calls you higher, He is urging you to rise above your fears, above your past, above your limitations. God's call is about potential. It's about realizing the fullness of what you were created for. It's about stretching beyond the boundaries you've set for yourself and tapping into a greater vision. The call is not always easy to hear. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a seed planted deep within your heart that stirs and grows over time. Other times, it is loud and undeniable, shaking you from the inside out. Either way, you will feel the pull, a longing that you can't ignore. This call to higher ground often stirs something deep in your spirit, something that you can't quite articulate, but that resonates on a soul-deep level. It feels like something more is waiting for you, like the life you are currently living is only a fraction of the fullness that is available to you. But here's the thing. The call is not just about a destination, it's about transformation. The invitation to rise is a call to be refined, to be shaped into someone who can carry the weight of the calling. When God calls you higher, He is asking you to trust that the journey will build something in you, strength, resilience, wisdom, character, that you could never develop if you stayed in the same place. There is a level of growth and maturity that can only happen when you respond to the call and move forward, even when it's hard, even when you can't yet see the whole picture. At the same time, answering the call requires bravery. It's easy to stay in the comfort zone. It's easy to look at where you are right now, compare it to the unknown ahead, and say, I'm not ready for that. I can't do it. But I want you to remember this. The power of God's call is not found in your ability to achieve it on your own. The strength to go higher doesn't come from you. It comes from Him. The same God who calls you higher is the one who will equip you for the journey. He won't leave you stranded or unprepared. When He calls you to something greater, He also gives you everything you need to rise to the occasion. You might feel unqualified. You might feel like you're not enough. But I want to remind you that God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He takes your weaknesses and turns them into strengths. He takes your doubts and turns them into faith. When He calls you higher, He calls you into a greater understanding of who you are in Him. And in that process, He transforms you into someone who is capable of doing things you once thought impossible. I know that the idea of going higher can feel intimidating. It can feel like there's a gap between where you are now and where God is calling you to be. But remember, every great thing that God has ever done in the lives of His people started with a simple step of obedience. Abraham had to leave everything he knew to follow God's call to a place he had never seen. Moses had to step out of his comfort zone to lead a nation out of slavery. Esther had to risk her life for the sake of her people. And every one of these people just like you, had doubts. They felt fear. They had moments of uncertainty. But they said yes. They answered the call to go higher. And in doing so, they became part of a greater story, one that was far more fulfilling, impactful, and meaningful than anything they could have imagined on their own. That's what happens when you answer the call. You become part of something bigger than yourself. You step into a legacy of faith that stretches far beyond your own lifetime. God is not just calling you for your own benefit. He is calling you to elevate not just your own life, but the lives of those around you. When you go higher, those who are watching you, your family, your friends, your community, will be inspired to rise with you. They will see the transformation in your life and be reminded that God can do the same for them. Your obedience, your willingness to answer the call, will become a beacon of hope for others. I want you to hear me clearly. You are not too small, too insignificant, or too broken to answer this call. God's call is for you, right where you are, with all of your flaws, doubts, and insecurities. He doesn't require perfection. He just requires a heart willing to trust Him, to step out in faith, and to rise to the occasion. When God calls you higher, it is an invitation to become the person you were always meant to be, to fulfill the purpose you were always meant to live, and to experience a life that goes beyond your wildest dreams. The question is not whether you are capable. The question is, will you say yes? Will you answer the call to go higher, even when it feels uncomfortable? Will you trust that God's vision for your life is greater than the vision you have for yourself? The choice is yours. God is calling you higher. It's time to rise. Faith is not just a word. It's not merely an idea or a concept to be discussed in church services or Bible studies. Faith is the very foundation upon which our lives are built, the unseen force that fuels every step we take. It is not something passive. It's active, it's alive, and it is the key that unlocks every door that God has in store for us. The truth is, when God calls you higher, He is calling you to a higher level of faith. It's the kind of faith that refuses to be shaken by the storms of life, the kind of faith that believes in His promises, even when the evidence around you doesn't match what you know to be true. In order to step into everything God has for you, you must have unshakable faith. This is not the kind of faith that is swayed by circumstances, by people's opinions, or by your own fears. Unshakable faith is the faith that looks at the mountains in front of you and says, "You may be big, but my God is bigger." It is the faith that sees the obstacles, acknowledges them, but refuses to allow them to dictate your path forward. You see, faith is not the absence of difficulty. It's the belief that God is greater than the difficulty, greater than the challenges, greater than the trials. It is the conviction that what God has spoken over your life will come to pass, no matter how long it takes, no matter how difficult the journey. There's a story in the Bible that beautifully illustrates this kind of faith. In Matthew 14, the disciples are in a boat, caught in a violent storm. The wind is strong, the waves are crashing, and they are terrified. But then they see something. Someone walking toward them on the water, and at first they think it's a ghost. But then they hear the voice, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." It is Jesus. Peter, full of faith, says, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus simply replies, "Come." Now think about this for a moment. Peter didn't wait for the storm to subside. He didn't wait for the water to calm down. He didn't ask Jesus for a guarantee that everything would be smooth sailing. No. Peter took a step out of the boat, with nothing but the word of Jesus to guide him. And in that moment, his faith led him to walk on water. But notice what happens next. When Peter took his eyes off Jesus, and began to focus on the storm around him, he started to sink. It wasn't the storm that caused him to sink. It was his doubt, his loss of focus on the one who called him higher. And the moment he cried out to Jesus, the Lord reached out and saved him. Unshakable faith requires us to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, no matter what the storm looks like around us. It's about trusting that He is the one who called us out onto the water, and He will never let us drown in the process. It's easy to have faith when everything is going well, when the seas are calm, when life feels predictable. But the true test of faith comes when the storm rages, when the waves crash, and when fear tries to take hold of your heart. That's when unshakable faith is needed most. Unshakable faith means trusting in God's timing,
even when it doesn't make sense. It means knowing that His ways are higher than our ways, and His plans are better than our own. We may not always understand why things happen the way they do, but we must believe that God is always working for our good. He is the author of our story, and He will finish it in the way that brings Him the most glory. Faith is knowing that even in the moments of silence, even in the seasons of waiting, God is still at work behind the scenes.
Think about Abraham, who was promised a child in his old age. God told him, "I will make you the father of many nations." But years went by, and the promise remained unfulfilled. Abraham's faith was tested time and time again, but despite the waiting, despite the doubts, Abraham chose to believe. And in his old age, God fulfilled His promise. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and through Isaac, God's covenant promise was passed down through generations. Abraham's faith wasn't perfect, but it was unshakable. He trusted that God would come through, even when it seemed impossible. When you respond to God's call to higher ground, you must have that kind of faith, the kind of faith that refuses to let go, that refuses to settle for less than what God has promised. It's the faith that says, even if I don't see it yet, I know it's coming. Even if I don't understand the process, I know that God's plan is unfolding right before me. Faith is not just believing in the good times. It's believing that God is good, even in the hard times. It's believing that He will never leave you, that He will always provide, and that His plans for your life are far greater than anything you could ever imagine. God is calling you higher, and He's calling you to rise to a level of faith that is unshakable, unwavering, and confident in His promises. Don't let fear or doubt hold you back. Don't let the noise of the world drown out the voice of God. Trust in His word, trust in His timing, and trust in His ability to bring about everything He has spoken over your life. With unshakable faith, you will rise to heights you never thought possible. Because when you trust in the one who called you, there is nothing that can stand in your way. There's something incredibly powerful about letting go of the past. It's not just a matter of moving on. It's about releasing the chains that have bound you for so long and stepping into the freedom that God has already made available to you. When God calls you higher, He is not only calling you to a new place, He's calling you to let go of everything that has been holding you back. Every mistake, every failure, every wound, and every regret. He's calling you to shed the weight of the past so you can rise into the fullness of your future. The past is a powerful thing. It shapes the way we view the world, the way we see ourselves, and the way we approach the future. But for many of us, the past also holds us captive. The pain of past hurts, the disappointment from past mistakes, and the fear of repeating those same mistakes can paralyze us, preventing us from moving forward. We become so focused on what went wrong, on the things we didn't achieve, on the relationships that fell apart, that we forget to look at the new opportunities before us. This is where the power of letting go comes in. God calls you higher, but in order to answer that call, you must release the past. You cannot move forward with the weight of yesterday holding you back. It's not always easy. Some of the things you've been through are painful, and it's tempting to hold on to those memories, to carry them with you as a way of protecting yourself. But holding on to past hurts only keeps you stuck in a cycle of bitterness, regret, and unforgiveness. It keeps you from experiencing the abundant life that God has promised you. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending that the hurt never happened or that the failures didn't shape you. Letting go means releasing the grip that the past has on your heart and mind. It means choosing to forgive yourself and others, even when it feels impossible. It means choosing to trust that God can use everything, every mistake, every failure, every painful memory, for your good. When you let go, you allow God to take those broken pieces and turn them into something beautiful. You allow Him to bring healing to your heart and wholeness to your spirit. But releasing the past also requires courage. It requires the courage to let go of the identity you've created based on your past experiences. For so many of us, we define ourselves by what we've been through. We allow our failures, our mistakes, and the things that have happened to us to dictate who we are. But God's call is a call to redefine yourself, not by your past, but by who you are in Him. He is calling you to see yourself as He sees you, whole, loved, and capable of great things. The past does not define you, God's love for you does. It's also important to remember that letting go of the past is not a one-time event. It's a process. Some days, you'll feel like you've completely let go, and other days, the past will try to creep back in, reminding you of what you once were, or what you once lost. But every time that happens, you have a choice, to hold on, or to release it again. Every time you let go, you make space for something new. You make space for healing, for growth, for joy. You make space for the new thing that God is doing in your life right now. Consider the story of the Israelites. God had promised them the land of Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey, a place of abundance and prosperity. But before they could enter that promise, they had to let go of the wilderness. They had to release their grip on the past, on the years they spent wandering, on the slavery they had left behind in Egypt. Even though they were free, their minds were still tethered to the past. They complained, they doubted, and they struggled to trust in the promise of the future, because they couldn't let go of the pain of the past. God had to remind them, over and over again, that they were not who they used to be. He was calling them to a new identity, a new future, and a new way of thinking. They couldn't inherit the promise with the mindset of slaves. They had to think like conquerors, and so do you. You cannot step into the fullness of what God has for you while you are still living in the shadow of your past. You cannot hold on to old patterns of thinking, old wounds, and old limitations and expect to walk into the abundance that God has prepared for you. God is calling you higher, but the first step in that journey is letting go of the past. You have to believe that the future He has for you is far greater than anything you've left behind. You have to trust that what He has planned is better than what you think you're holding onto. The past is behind you, but the future is in front of you, and God is asking you to step into it with open hands, ready to receive all that He has for you. Letting go may be painful. It may require you to face old wounds and confront old fears. But remember, every time you release the past, you are making room for healing. Every time you forgive, you are making room for peace. Every time you choose to believe that God has something better for you, you are making room for hope. Let go of the past and make space for the future God has prepared for you. You were not created to live in the past. You were created to move forward, to rise higher, and to step into the purpose that God has for your life. And in order to do that, you must release the chains that have held you bound and embrace the freedom that comes with trusting God. Let go of the past and watch how God begins to elevate you to new heights. God doesn't call us to remain in our comfort zones. In fact, He is always calling us to a life that challenges us, stretches us, and pushes us beyond the limits we have placed on ourselves. When God calls you higher, it is not an invitation to remain in what is familiar or safe. It is a call to leave the security of what you know and step into the unknown. The calling He places on your life is one that invites you to grow, to evolve, and to become the person you were always meant to be. This call demands that you rise beyond comfort and embrace the discomfort that comes with real transformation. Comfort is an enemy of growth. When we are comfortable, we settle, we stop reaching for more, we stop dreaming big, and we stop pursuing the purposes God has set before us. Comfort creates complacency. It tells us that what we have now is enough, and that striving for anything greater is unnecessary or even dangerous. But God doesn't call us to live in complacency. He calls us to a higher purpose, a purpose that often requires us to step outside the boundaries of our own limited thinking and our self-imposed restrictions.
It's easy to look at the things we've already accomplished and think that they're enough. It's easy to stay in a place where we feel confident, where we know the steps to take and the outcome is predictable, but that's not where growth happens. Growth happens in the moments when you are pushed beyond your current capacity, when you are required to trust God in ways you never have before. Those moments are uncomfortable. They stretch you in ways that you didn't think were possible. But it is through that stretching that you discover the depth of your own potential. Think about the story of Moses. When God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses was far from comfortable with the task. He didn't feel equipped for the job. He didn't believe he was the right person. He had doubts, fears, and insecurities. He had lived for years in the comfort of obscurity, tending sheep in the wilderness, away from the life he once knew. He had become accustomed to his quiet existence, and stepping into the grand destiny God had for him felt like a leap into the unknown. Yet, God was calling Moses out of his comfort zone into a life that would impact not only his own life, but the lives of an entire nation. Moses had to overcome his own limitations and fears in order to walk in the calling God had placed on his life. And that's the challenge we all face. The calling to something greater often requires us to confront the areas where we feel inadequate, the areas where we have settled for less, and the areas where we are holding back from fully trusting God. God calls us to move beyond the comfort of what we know into the fullness of what He has prepared for us. When God calls us to something greater, it's not always easy. The unknown is intimidating. The idea of stepping into something new can stir up a host of emotions: fear, doubt, insecurity. But every great thing that God has ever done in the lives of His people started with a step of faith into the unknown. It started with the willingness to let go of what was familiar and embrace the discomfort of what was ahead. Whether it was Abraham leaving his homeland to follow God's call, or Peter stepping out of the boat to walk on water, every act of faith required a departure from the comfort zone. God is not asking you to be comfortable. He's asking you to trust Him. He's asking you to trust that even when the path ahead is unclear, He is already there, guiding you, preparing you, and equipping you for what lies ahead. The unknown doesn't have to be a place of fear, it can be a place of discovery. It is in the discomfort of stepping out of our comfort zones that we learn to rely on God in ways we never have before. It is in those moments of vulnerability, where we don't have all the answers, that we experience God's provision, protection, and power in profound ways. In fact, it is often in the moments of discomfort that we see God's hand the most clearly. When we are comfortable, we are tempted to rely on our own strength, our own wisdom, and our own resources. But when we are stretched, we are forced to rely on Him. We are reminded that we cannot do it on our own, and it is in that space of dependence on God that we experience His strength, grace, and faithfulness in ways that we never could have imagined. It's important to recognize that the discomfort we experience when we step out in faith is not a sign that we are doing something wrong. It is a sign that we are stepping into something that is greater than ourselves. It's a sign that we are embracing God's plan for our lives, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it challenges our comfort. God calls us to rise above the limitations of our own thinking, to rise above the fears that hold us back, and to step into a life that is marked by purpose, impact, and transformation. The discomfort of stepping out of our comfort zones is temporary, but the growth and transformation that come from it are eternal. The road may be difficult at times, but it is the road that leads to the fulfillment of God's purpose for our lives. Every step you take out of your comfort zone is a step toward the greater things God has prepared for you. Every challenge you face, every moment of discomfort, is an opportunity for God to reveal Himself to you in deeper ways. God is calling you higher, and in order to answer that call, you must be willing to embrace the discomfort that comes with it. Don't let fear or complacency hold you back from stepping into the greatness that God has planned for you. Trust that He will provide everything you need for the journey, and know that every step you take in faith is a step toward becoming the person you were created to be. The call to go higher is a call to rise beyond comfort, to embrace the discomfort, and to experience the life of purpose that God has destined for you. When God calls you higher, He doesn't just call you to a different place, He calls you to a different mindset, a higher way of thinking, a perspective that is anchored not in your circumstances, but in His promises. The call to go higher is the call to rise above the limitations of your own understanding, to see beyond the temporary and into the eternal. It's the invitation to align your thoughts, your heart, and your actions with the truth that God's plan for your life is far greater than anything you could ever imagine. Our mindset is one of the most powerful things that influence the trajectory of our lives. How we think about ourselves, how we see the world, and how we respond to challenges all come from the way we think. The world constantly bombards us with messages that encourage us to think small, to think based on what we see, to think according to our own limitations. But God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and His ways are higher than our ways. He calls us to think in alignment with His truth, to see ourselves as He sees us, to believe that His promises are true, even when everything around us suggests otherwise. When God calls us higher, He's calling us to stop thinking like the world and start thinking like kingdom citizens. The world teaches us to be afraid of failure, to measure our worth by what we have or don't have, to look at our limitations as roadblocks rather than opportunities for God's glory to shine through. But the kingdom of God operates on a completely different set of principles. It's a kingdom where the last shall be first, where the weak are made strong, and where nothing is impossible with God. Think about the story of David. When Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, he was looking for someone who fit the worldly mold of a leader. He was looking for someone tall, strong, and impressive. But God had a different plan. God told Samuel not to look at the outward appearance, but to look at the heart. God saw something in David that others didn't. He saw the heart of a king. David was just a young shepherd, overlooked by his family, but God saw the potential within him. God's call to David was not based on his outward appearance or his circumstances. It was based on the greatness that God had placed within him. David had to learn to see himself the way God saw him, to embrace a mindset that believed that with God, he could do anything, even defeat a giant. The mind of a conqueror is the mind that believes that God can use anything, no matter how insignificant it may seem. It's the mindset that says, I may not have all the resources, but God has more than enough. I may not have the experience, but God will equip me for the task. It's the mindset that recognizes that when God calls you to something, He is not looking at your current limitation. He is looking at your willingness to trust Him, to step out in faith, and to rise above what you see in the natural. The way we think directly impacts the way we live. If you believe that your circumstances define your potential, if you think that what you have now is all there is to your future, then you will limit yourself to what you can see with your natural eyes. But God is calling you to a higher perspective, to see beyond the now and into the future He has promised you. He is calling you to rise above the noise of doubt and fear, and to fix your eyes on the truth of His word. When you align your thoughts with His truth, you begin to think bigger, dream bigger, and live bigger. You begin to see opportunities where others see obstacles, and you begin to take risks because you know that God is with you every step of the way.
The Apostle Paul understood this principle better than most. He writes in Philippians 3:13-14, "Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus." Paul had a mindset that was not fixed on his past failures, his past mistakes, or even his past achievements. He was focused on the higher calling that God had placed on his life, and he was determined to press forward toward that prize, no matter what. This is the mindset that God calls us to adopt. A mindset that doesn't dwell on the past, that doesn't get bogged down by the failures or the victories of yesterday, but focuses on the greater purpose that lies ahead. When you have the mind of Christ, you stop looking at your past as a defining factor in your future. You stop seeing yourself as disqualified or incapable because of what you've been through. Instead, you start seeing yourself as chosen, as capable, and as empowered by the Holy Spirit to fulfill the calling God has placed on your life. A kingdom mindset doesn't just change the way we think, it changes the way we live. It changes the way we approach challenges, the way we interact with others, and the way we see the opportunities in front of us. It helps us rise above the fear and doubt that can often hold us back. When we see with God's eyes, we realize that the struggles we face are not meant to defeat us, but to refine us. We realize that every obstacle is an opportunity for God to demonstrate His power and faithfulness in our lives. God is calling you higher, and that means He's calling you to a higher way of thinking. He's calling you to align your mind with His word, to let go of the limiting beliefs that have held you back, and to embrace the limitless possibilities that are found in Him. When you begin to think according to the mind of Christ, you start to see yourself not as a victim of circumstance, but as a victor in Christ. You start to believe that there is nothing impossible for God, and you begin to live in the fullness of the calling He has placed on your life. When God calls you higher, He calls you to rise above your natural limitations and step into the divine perspective that will transform your life. When God calls you higher, it's not merely an invitation to achieve more or to reach new heights in your career, relationships, or ambitions. It's a call to be transformed, to shift from living according to the world's standards to living according to the eternal truths that God has revealed. His call to you is a call to a higher way of thinking, a higher way of being, and a higher way of living. This call requires you to leave behind your limitations, your doubts, and your fears, and to step into the fullness of the person God has designed you to be. Answering the call to rise higher means embracing the discomfort that comes with growth. It means choosing to trust in God's wisdom, even when the path ahead is unclear, and when the journey is difficult. It means stepping out of your comfort zone, knowing that the challenges you face along the way are not obstacles, but opportunities for God to display His power and faithfulness in your life. God does not call you to remain where you are. He calls you to grow, to stretch, and to go beyond what you have known in order to experience the fullness of His plan for your life. This journey requires a shift in mindset, a transformation in the way you think and see the world. God calls you to view yourself through his eyes, to recognize the potential he has placed within you, and to stop limiting yourself by your past mistakes, failures, or fears. He calls you to believe that you are capable, not because of your own strength, but because he equips you with everything you need to fulfill the purpose he has for you. The mindset of a conqueror is one that relies on God's strength, knowing that he is more than enough, and that with him, nothing is impossible. When God calls you higher, he invites you to let go of the past. You can no longer be defined by the mistakes, regrets, or hurts that have shaped your journey up until this point. You must release what has held you captive so that you can move forward with freedom. The past does not have the power to dictate your future unless you allow it to. God has already made a way for you to walk in freedom, and he is calling you to embrace that freedom today. Your destiny is not tied to what you've been through, but to what God is calling you to in the future. Stepping into a higher calling also means embracing the discomfort of growth. The process may not always be easy, but it is always worth it. Every challenge you face on this journey is an opportunity for God to reveal himself to you in deeper ways. Every step you take in faith brings you closer to the person God has created you to be. The path to your higher calling may require hard work, perseverance, and sacrifice, but know that every moment of discomfort is shaping you for the destiny that lies ahead. God is calling you to a life of purpose, a life that goes beyond what you can see with your natural eyes. His plan for your life is far greater than anything you can imagine. He has placed gifts, talents, and dreams within you that are meant to be used for his glory. When you answer the call to rise higher, you are not just walking into a greater version of yourself, you are stepping into the fullness of the legacy God has prepared for you to leave in this world. You are becoming a vessel of his power, his love, and his truth, and through you others will be drawn to the hope and transformation that only he can bring. As you step into the call that God has placed on your life, know that you are not alone. He is with you every step of the way, guiding you, strengthening you, and empowering you to fulfill your purpose. Trust in his timing, trust in his plan, and trust that every step of this journey is leading you to something greater than you could have ever dreamed. God is calling you higher. Answer that call, and watch how he takes you to places you never imagined, filling your life with his peace, joy, and abundant grace.